Welcome to the Focused Professional Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Lenton, and this is episode 30. Welcome to the Focused Professional Podcast. Today's guest has multiple fellowships, many International Photographer of the Year titles, literally hundreds of awards to his name. He's a well-known teacher, speaker and judge. It's Tony Hewitt. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Joe. How are you? Thanks for having me along.
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure.
Now, I met you at the Societies of Photographers convention there and saw your panel of aerial landscapes, and you seem to be quite known for aerial photography. It's not a very common genre. So how did you get started doing aerial photos?
If I had to pin it back to a single moment, it probably came from a trip that my wife had booked to go on a hot air balloon for a birthday, which is probably going back maybe 16, 17, 18 years. And we hopped in a hot air balloon and I took 4 photos, I believe, that day. It was can I say brands, Joe?
Oh, I'll let you.
It doesn't matter. It was a 35mm camera. It was about 30 megapixel. But, you know, and I took a couple of shots. And anyway, one of those photos was of a mist over a valley with the sun rising, and it seemed to attract a lot of people's attention. I think from memory, I put it in a competition and it won a couple of things. It won the State Photography Awards and a few things. So, but my interest was piqued. My curiosity was certainly triggered, and it went from there really. And probably a couple of years later, I was working with a group of photographers that I have done many projects with, many collaborative exhibitions, and we've worked together a lot. And it's some very, very top photographers. Peter Eastway, who some of your listeners may have heard of. Christian Fletcher is another one that some may have heard of. Michael Fletcher, who's Christian's twin brother. And Dr. Les Walkling, who is a international consultant to people like Canson and ASO and so on. But anyway, we worked on a few projects together, and we did a project on the west coast of WA over a place called Shark Bay using light aircraft. And so that was another opportunity. And from there, it just seemed to grow. Just seem to enjoy the world from a different perspective, if you like.
So you don't suffer from vertigo then?
Well, here's an interesting thing, Joe. I'm not vertigo so much, but I'm actually afraid of heights. I can't climb a ladder to the roof without freezing up and sweating and all of that. And I get airsick. And most people find that strange because I've got over 400 hours of flying in helicopters and planes shooting aerial photography, and yet I'm afraid of heights and I get airsick. So there you go.
I was just going to say those things are things I suffer from and would probably make it almost impossible for me to do it. I just think if you try and take something so you don't feel queasy while you're flying, you're probably not quite at your peak concentration then, are you? These, tablets that are supposed to stop you feeling ill can make you feel a bit dopey. Well, they do me anyway.
Yeah, I do take something when I fly, and it's a pretty bit generic, and I've found the dosage that allows me to stay reasonably alert. At the same time, it removes the need for me to feel queasy. But I think it's also about managing yourself, and I think it's a lot of things we do as photographers, whether you're even as a wedding photographer, if you're about to go and shoot a wedding, you don't just suddenly have a big roast meal the minute before you walk out the door. You manage your system, and I know my system. So if I'm about to go flying for an hour or two, and I've flown in 4-seater planes for up to 5.5 hours in one hit, and that's a long time. That's like flying across Europe in a plane. And you just manage. You find how to eat properly. You look after your system. So yeah, I have found ways over the years to look after that. And that's one of the things when I'm instructing or leading tours with people. People want to know about shutter speeds and what lens do I use and things like that. And I sort of try to make sure they understand that you can have all of those things right, but if you get up there and 10 minutes into the flight, you're feeling like you want to be anywhere but in that plane or that helicopter,
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how good the rest of the gear is and how good your technique is. You just want to get back on the ground. So you need to
Mm.
manage yourself so you can enjoy the experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an easily forgotten aspect that you manage yourself sort of bodily, but also kind of mentally, I think, preparing yourself for what you're going to do. So you're in the kind of the right mind space for it. So, I mean, looking at your images that you tend to capture in these situations, I mean, would you go with an intent of what you're after? Would you plan it carefully? Are they kind of more abstracts that you're after? What is your kind of process as you think through what you're going to photograph when you're doing an aerial image?
I think it's a bit of both, Joe. Like you go to a location because of the potential that location offers. People often say, "Do you look on Google Earth?" Well, I didn't used to in the early days,
Hmm.
but then over time, I've on occasion looked at areas and go, "Well, what potential does this area have?" But again, I come back to whether you're shooting a portrait or a wedding or a commercial shoot or working with a model, you kind of have an idea what to expect, but you don't
Mm.
know what's going to happen. So
Mm.
you look to provide or to put yourself in an opportunity or in a space where this is likely to be what you find, and then you can respond to it. So there's very much
Mm.
um, a process that is about the responding in the moment. But if you fly over a desert, you're not going to see reefs and water. If I'm flying over tidal areas where there might be, say, 5 or 10 meter tides, and I want to get the tidal patterns with the mud and things like that, then I'll check the tidal charts and I'll say, well, high tide is at 2 o'clock. Don't fly at
Mm.
2 o'clock because everything's underwater. Maybe fly an hour or two either side of low tide, and then I'm going to get the mud and the river patterns or the rivulets, the textual patterns that are caused by the run out or the run in of the tide. So
Mm.
same with color. You can go up at different times of day, and if you shoot a salt lake, for instance, that might have a thin film of water on it, might be 1 inch, and this salt lake could be 20 kilometers wide, but
Wow.
it's pure white salt, and then on top of it, it could have a film of water over parts of it. And at
Mm.
different times of the day, if you imagine going up around sunset, and you could have some oranges and pinks reflecting off that water. But if you go in the middle of the day, you've probably got a lot of specular highlight, a lot of bright white. So you can you know choose the times and choose the locations that are conducive to the types of images you want to make. But at the same time, there's no guarantee. If there was, you just
Mm.
take a snap off Google Earth and you don't need to bother flying. So it is a case of, do your research. And at the same time, sometimes like these days, I know a lot of places pretty much I can direct the pilot with my eyes shut to where I want to go. But I go there knowing that at this time of year, in this particular weather conditions, with this amount of cloud cover, at this time of day, with this amount of wind rippling the water
Mm.
surface, with this amount of evaporation having happened over the last 3 months since I've been there, it's always going to be a little bit different. So
Mm.
yeah, I think you can hedge your bets. It's a bit of both.
So, I mean, you mentioned at like different times of day. With some landscape photographers, there are some tools of the trade almost, which have become kind of sacrosanct that they don't want to go outside of. Like one of them is that kind of time of day because of the lighting. A lot of landscape photographers don't want to go out in the middle of the day because it's too specular for a lot of their liking. And similarly, with the way they compose an image, it might be, well, rule of thirds, third of sky, third of sea, third of land, whatever, that kind of thing. How much is your approach governed by these kind of typical tools of the trade?
Joe, I was just thinking, you don't know me super well, but you've met me and we've worked together, and you probably could guess if I said, "Do you think I'm a very much a rules orientated person or non-rules?" I think you'd probably guess that I'm not. Um,
Yeah.
Now, I put a caveat on that. I understand the rules, and I think the rules provide great guidelines. And I think sometimes if you're not sure how to approach something, you start with the rules. And Then you go towards the edge and you reach out to the corners of the rules. If you think of the rules as a box that we operate inside because it works inside the box, then you go to
Mm-hmm.
the edges of the box and you push and you prod and you see what can be stretched. And for me, it's now become more of a gut feel than a cerebral, academic ruling. Having said
Mm-hmm.
that, the gut feel, when we talk about instinct,
Mm-hmm.
instinct is driven by feeling and heart and things like that, but it's also driven by knowledge and experience. And
Yeah.
if we've learnt the rules, then when we have a gut feeling or instinct at a subliminal level, I believe that that is contributing to the gut feel. So I
Mm.
look at images and when you look at an image and we talk about composition and we say something's well composed or not well composed, another way to say that is it feels like the image is balanced or it's not balanced. Now, the
Mm.
interesting thing is, if we strip it back, photography is communication. And we don't always have to be saying something that's balanced. We may deliberately choose to add tension to an image by making it unbalanced. And yes, in
Yeah.
a competition, the judges might decide to give it a 45 or something because it's completely cropped badly and it's unbalanced. But in an art world or in a pure communication sense, it could be something that out of 10 pictures is the one image that really grabs people's attention. Now, I'm not
Mm.
condoning, because you are well aware of my connection to competitions around the place. I'm not condoning that go and deliberately break the rules and you should be getting gold awards. It's not about that. But having had the privilege and been lucky enough to work and be successful in competition, but also be successful in exhibitions and sharing my work, I know that in the art world, it's about communicating something. And sometimes if you want to communicate this a sense of imbalance, a sense of drama, a sense of tension, you make people feel uncomfortable. And one of the
Mm.
ways to do
Mm.
that is by working outside the rules a little bit or bending the rules. So
Mm.
having said that, when I shoot, I like people's attention to stay inside the frame if I can.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've probably developed more of a feel for what's the right composition than a left brain follow the rules. If
Mm.
I look at the image after I'm happy with it, if I say, yeah, I'm really happy with that composition, I can possibly drag it back into rule of thirds or a Fibonacci sequence or some other mathematical ratio that, we look at and go, it fits
Mm.
this shell spiral or, there's a multitude of mechanisms that a lot of people use. But
Yeah.
these days, I prefer to not be guided by my left brain, part of my brain, but rather the right side of my brain, the feel for something. And
Mm.
I think that's where we find style and that's where we find our difference. Because if we only stick to the rules and what's coming out of our left side of our brain, we're all going to do a lot of the same things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the combination because one of the things I promote a lot, Joe, when I work with people, whether it's one-on-one coaching or in my mastermind group or even in a stage presentation, we are made up of multiple people. And I don't mean we're all schizophrenic or we're crazy. I just mean we have multiple parts to ourselves. And being a creative is about learning to make peace with all of those people, all of those aspects of ourselves, all those facets.
Mm.
And, in each of us, we talk left brain, right brain, but, for some people, it might be easy to think of there's a scientist and there's an artist. There's
Mm.
there's an academic and a jokester. There's a magician and there's a librarian. And one of them has the facts and the concrete and the rules. And the other has but what if we try this? And what if we bend that? And
Mm.
how can we make it different? And it's about a partnership. It's
Mm.
about a partnership. And often when people come into the creative world or start trying to do something with their photography creatively, they come in with a strength that's very much left brain or right brain. They're very imaginative. They're very got lots of ideas and they love going outside the rules, but they don't know the rules. And they don't
Mm.
understand how to technically do something. Or they come from the other side where they're technically very good, but they're very reluctant to step outside the boundary. And it's when
Mm.
we can create a marriage between the two that for me, I feel you can really come into your own and you really find your full potential. And for me, people reach their full potential when they're exploiting or exploring and expressing through both sides. So when I'm looking at composition, when I'm shooting, I'm listening to all facets. If it feels like it's got a good balance and it feels right, and I'm not getting a lot of resistance from the other side of me saying, oh, but it's breaking this rule. And if it does give me that resistance, I'll listen to it and go, okay, so it's breaking that rule. But you know what? I can justify the breaking of the rule because it's really pulling people to that corner. And when they get there, judges often use the term cookie, like a little nugget that they find. When they breaks the rules and it takes them into that corner, guess what they find? And now the whole picture makes sense. So I think
Yeah.
there's a bit of everything. I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think that sometimes as well, when people start out, there can be, I mean, this may not be true of all camera clubs and things like that, but to an extent, there was some truth behind it with the club that I joined sort of locally when I was getting going, was that it was very much kind of the technical side was very important because they wanted their criteria for judging in that way. And also very much the light, the positive, not so much the darker side, so everything had to kind of make you feel good, or it had to look beautiful or something like that. Whereas, as you rightly say, we are a combination of all sorts of different aspects. And sometimes we need to tap into that other side.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because to say if a judge says, I don't like this, so I'm giving it a low score, I'm not sure I agree with that approach, And I think making images that make people smile or making images that make people uncomfortable is a preference. And I don't think one's better than the other or one's right and one's wrong. It's a preference. And sure, you will probably find more people enjoy images that make them feel good than ones that make them feel not so good or uncomfortable. But there are times when, you've got a background in commercial photography, and I've done a fair bit myself. And there are times when the requirement is an image that makes people stop and think about something that's maybe uncomfortable. And I remember judging an image many years ago. I was actually one of the judges on the panel, and it was an image done. This is a terrible visual, but it'll get the impact we need. It was a picture of a goat, and the goat had been skinned, and the skin was presented like a peeled orange where the peels had been pulled apart, the orange peel like a spring. And you could see the skin of the goat outside what was left. And it made you feel sick in the stomach to see it. And when it came up, technically it was fantastic. It was lit brilliantly. As a commercial image from a technical point of view, it was perfect. It was just brilliant. Emotionally, it actually made you feel sick. It was like someone punched you in the stomach. And I remember the panel, I sort of looked at it and felt really sick. And then I thought, wow, of all the images I've seen today, this one, as a piece of communication, smacked me straight between the eyes. I'll never forget it. I still haven't forgotten it. It's probably 15 years ago. The rest of the panel gave it low scores. I think my score was like a high 80, and the rest of the panel had given it like a 55, a 60, a 65. So there was a debate. And the first couple of speakers made the comments that, I just can't even look at this picture. It's disgusting. And they had all of these reasons for not liking it. And I agreed with everything they said. And I said, but that's, are we judging what we like, or are we judging the power of the photograph, the degree to which the photographer has communicated something? But are we saying you can only get it's only successful if the something being communicated is a positive feel good? And I felt that in this situation, I said, if someone had come to a commercial photographer and said, we want to promote and raise awareness on vivisection or this practice and how we don't want it to happen, wow, what a picture. That's going to really grab attention. I said, so in that case, it's extremely successful. So I think we do need to be aware of the difference between preference and our comfort zones and what is effective visual communication.
Definitely. And, you've talked as well about sort of our kind of gut instincts and as that as being more than just an initial reaction, but that being something that's built on our experience, our learning from before. And I think that's very much how the brain works. Things that you're familiar with, it can do a lot quicker. So building that experience, it can then tap into something very quickly. So the danger with that, of course, when we look at an image, is that we can get conditioned a certain way, and our initial reaction can just be yuck, don't like it, and switch off. It's trying to get sort of beyond that and use it. But it's a really interesting tool, because sometimes people talk about gut and just think, oh, it's just emotion. It's not thought through. We need to bring it into a rational space and work our way through it. And you think, well, a sports person or something, say someone playing professional tennis or cricket, they can hit the ball, they can pinpoint where it's going to go subconsciously. They're not working consciously so much on that kind of thing. When they first started, yeah, but the ball was going a lot slower. As things speed up, you rely more and more on that experience, on that built-up knowledge, so that your brain can tap into those memories quickly and give you the good stuff. So I'm one for thinking that we need to sort of rescue the idea of gut instinct and that from this pit of it's just an emotional response to something and we need to move beyond it. I think it's more valuable than that.
I agree. And I think, when we talk about photography and we talk about where photography's come from and where it's going, if you simplified it right down, it came from a method of recording the visual world. Where is it going? Well, recording the visual world is available to everybody, and that's not hard to do. And now the hard part is telling the truth. What is the truth? Because anything can be created. But it's what are you trying to communicate? Are you trying to communicate what something looks like, which is where we probably started with photography.
Yeah.
And then you look at the romantics, the black and white photojournalists, the Cartier-Bressons and the Salgado, who just passed away, not that long ago. They weren't as caught up in, is it technically perfect? I mean, from a purist point of view, they were technically perfect, but you look at a lot of the way people measure photography now, it's not technically perfect, but the impact, the emotional content, the narrative, the story that they're trying to tell. And sometimes it's not even about story. I mean, emotional impact doesn't have to have narrative. I have a little bit of a pet soapbox thing, Joe, that I don't even know if I should say because I don't want to polarize people. But I often worry with competition that we shouldn't only be rewarding narrative, that sometimes images are about aesthetic. And I've kind of over the years with my interactions with competition felt that all images are somewhere on the scale of narrative to aesthetic. And at one end is pure narrative and at the other end is pure aesthetic. But most images are somewhere in the middle. And an image can be equally as impactful and as powerful as a pure piece of aesthetic as it can be, as a pure piece of narrative. And in a pure piece of narrative, something that's really powerful. I mean, we've all can probably think of the Vietnam girl in the black and white shot of the girl running down with the napalm. We can all think of the baby on the beach, the turkey with the boat that capsized, the immigrants in the boat and capsized, and the baby. There's things that we think of and they make us feel terrible. They make us feel sick. They're not the strong emotional impact. No one can really remember how technically good the photos were, but nobody really cares. But then we think of images of, a perfect rose or, the perfect sunset and even a slightly blown out area. We think, oh, look at the blowout. If you could have just kept that under control, because the power of that image is in the aesthetic. It's in the perfection of nature's design and things like that. So for me, there's room for all of it. And that's where I think we need to be thinking more and more going forward, making sure there's room for all of it, not one or the other, if that makes sense.
No, I think that with in a way is that using that term narrative immediately makes us think of stories as opposed to just communication. And certain genres definitely are storytelling. But an image can still communicate without there being necessarily an obvious story to it. So to me, communication is the overarching thing.
Correct.
How is it communicating to you? Is it communicating to say, this is my feeling of standing in awe in front of this sunset? No.
Yeah.
That's it. Not the one day I hiked up a hill and I saw this. And it doesn't need all that behind it to communicate. So
You think if you look back into the art world and you think of, we had realists and impressionists, and we have cubists, and we had all of these different deviations in the art world, and each was trying to sort of separate itself from the pure art of this is what it looks like.
Mm.
The Impressionist Monet was saying, well, don't get caught up in the detail. This is how it feels, Turner with color, W.M. Turner, similar. That I don't want you to be worried about the detail. Just look at the color and the emotion that comes from the warm colors or the cool colors or the darkness or the bright areas and the light. Look at where I'm dragging you and how it makes you feel. I want to transport you to the place so you know how I felt. And sometimes photography, the strength of an image can be more to do with the lighting mood. I mean, you take an image of a little, a little town in South America made of, mud brick homes, and it's a little street with a couple of lights on it. If you photograph that in the middle of the day in bright light, completely different feeling to if you came down half an hour after sunset. There's a little bit of a glow in the sky. The tungsten lights are the strongest light source. You've got these dust in the air, so you're getting all these beams. Completely different feeling with the same content, the exact same composition. So it's all different. And I think, for me, coming back to what you said before about gut feeling and instinct and having the knowledge, I often use the analogy that when we learn to drive a car, we start off watching our parents drive or someone we know drive, and we think that doesn't look hard. And we actually have an unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. And then someone puts us behind the steering wheel and we go to a conscious incompetence. Now we know what we can't do.
Yep.
So we practice and we learn to drive. And in the early days of driving, we gain a conscious competence. We can drive, but we have to consciously think about what we're doing. And if we don't, we miss a gear or we crunch gears and things. But most of us, most of the people listening to this podcast, I'm guessing, have got to a point of unconscious competence. They don't have to think about it. And I think it's the same with photography and rules. We learn our gear. You get a new camera. It doesn't matter how good a photographer you are. And these days, you just have to change one model. You can go from a, XYZ 4B to a 4C, and suddenly they've changed half the stuff. So you got to go and do a 6-day degree, at university to learn how to use it. But the point is, you learn your tools to the point where you don't have to think about them. They become an extension of your background thinking, of your conceptualization. And what excites me the most, Joe, and what keeps me going, I've been going 35 years plus, is I'm only now beginning to understand how my image making is driven by unconscious, deep-seated concepts in my brain that I can't describe in words. I have to find ways to express them in the same way that a musician will express concepts using music, and there are no words. There are no words. And to help people understand what I mean by that, we have words in one language that you learn another language and they go, we don't have a word for that.
Yep. Absolutely.
We can use this word and this word, but they kind of fall either side of what you're saying. There is no word. And sometimes it's a photo that when someone looks at a photo, they go, that's what you mean. But there is no word. And I'm starting to understand by both my own discoveries and explorations, but also by watching people's responses to my images. Do an exhibition, people walk around in the gallery and they see this image and they start responding to it emotionally. I start to understand that there's been a communication of a concept or of a feeling that couldn't be put into words. The only method of communication was color, tone, texture, symbolism, shape. but no actual word. And that's one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that truly excites me. So understanding the value of learning the tools, whether it's your camera and how it works, the rules of photography, knowing that if you overexpose something by 5 stops, it will be white.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not bad unless you don't
Mm.
want it to be white. Or
Yeah.
underexposing it by 5 stops, it will be black, which is okay if you want that particular pixel to be black. But if you
Mm.
know these things and they become not your master, but your slave, then you have a mechanism and a process by which you can express conceptual thinking. And, if I bring it back for the people who might be photographing babies and births or weddings or portraits or children, when we photograph a couple at a wedding,
Mm-hmm.
are we just photographing a man in a suit and a lady in a dress, or 2 men in suits, or whatever the couple is? No, I don't think so. I think we're photographing something, the concept of love, the concept of
Mm-hmm.
connection. And there's no one pixel that actually captures the love. You don't go and look at a
Mm.
photograph of 2 people and think, wow, that's such a brilliant picture of 2 people in love. And then look at it and go, well, pixel there and that pixel, they're the ones that are expressing the love. There's something inherent in the combination. And I love philosophy. And for me,
Mm.
there's an element of The Alchemist in that. I don't know if you've
Mm-hmm.
read the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho or understand the concept of alchemy, but sometimes we're putting together a combination of things in our images that together say something that
Mm.
can't be said any other way, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just excites the crap out of me, I tell you.
Yeah. Well, that's like artists and musicians often will sort of say, well, if I could have described it in words, I wouldn't have need to produce the piece.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, if I could say it in words, who needs the picture? I think Hopper
Yeah.
said that with one of his photos. Uh,
Yeah.
when he created the one of the cafe, and I think that was
Mm.
one of his quotes. That if I could have said it in words, I wouldn't need to paint it or create the picture.
Well,
Mm.
exactly, and I mean for me, I mean as a lot of landscape photographers do these days, I spent a sort of time with the good old 10-stop filter. I mean, you can't be a landscape photographer these days and go to the coast and not at least try it at least once. But
Yeah.
for me, at the time, that tool existed to help me convey more of the experience of being there rather than showing what visually was there. So, if you'd stood where I was and looked, you wouldn't have seen the resulting image because the 10-stop filter makes the exposure so long. It's not what you see. It's not what your eyes see. It's something different. But I was going through a period where I was getting up early and going around seeing the sunrise at different points along the Norfolk coast near where I live, and I was finding it a very peaceful, very meditative experience, very gentle, and most of the time I was just on my own. So the images using that tool, it helped me to feel like I could convey aspects of that, what it felt like, what I was experiencing while I was there. You look at a 10-stop sort of smoky, milky water and you think, it didn't look like that. Well, no, of course it didn't. That's
Well,
not
the
the
interesting
point.
thing is, when I listen to as you describe that, which I 100% agree with, you know, when we talk about sharing the experience of being on, watching the coast and sitting down under a coconut tree or, just watching the sunrise slowly, one of the key elements of the experience is time. You know,
Mm,
you don't get that experience if you're there for a split second. If someone just did a flash of it and it's gone, you don't get that experience. So, in order to express one of the key elements of the experience, how do you
mm,
share or how do you illustrate time?
yeah.
And time is another thing like love, that time, there's no pixel for time, and people might say, oh,
Mm,
about a clock or something. No.
mm,
To actually a pixel that says time, how do you do it? Well, it's how you use those pixels. And by
mm.
blending them, as you said, you're illustrating the effect of time in the same way that the shadows on the wall, the old story of a fireplace in a cave, and we see the shadows on the wall,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
which we think tells us what's going on behind us. But when we turn around, we realize it's completely different. It's just the shadows gave us one expression in 2D, not 3D.
Mm.
And
That's
when we
Plato,
see,
isn't it? I think. Yeah.
yeah, I think, yeah, there was, I just,
Yeah.
back in my mind, sort of
Yeah.
stuff like that happens to me. It pops out, not always making sense either. So I apologize. But yeah, the whole blurred clouds, sitting there just
Mm.
daydreaming, getting lost in time. One way to
Mm.
express that is, as you say, going back to a basic filter. And, this sort of taps into the idea of what the why, why
Mm.
people take pictures. What are you trying to say and why? And, if you say, well, I had such a great time just sitting there watching the clouds drift by, and you take a snapshot of the clouds and they're sharp, it doesn't communicate the drifting by bit. So
No.
blending them and blurring them and allowing time to be part of your image through a long exposure is a way to do that. So yeah, that's
Mm.
that's that's the
Mm.
beauty of what we do.
Mm. So you've talked about how you're steeped in art and philosophy. So you've got lots of different sort of influences to your work there. And you just then touched on the why of a particular image. Can you tell us a bit about perhaps what the why is of what you do as a whole? What is your why? What sort of values underpin what you're doing? Why do you get up each day as a photographer?
Um, I've always found that an interesting question, and I almost have a shade of guilt because I ask that question a lot when I'm coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I have answers and sometimes I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if you come back to the basics of who we are and why we're here as human beings, each of us we're all different. I think we all know that. And there are certain things we do without the need for any motivation. There's certain things we just do because it's who we are, it's what we do. Is that
Mm.
something that we have no control over? No, I don't need to go into that. But I think we know that there's stuff we like to do and we can do it ad infinitum and we never get tired. There's other things that we are asked to do or we choose to do, but we need to push ourselves and we do run out of energy. So I find that I over the years have got to the point where I love to experience something and then share that experience. But
Uh-huh.
but it's not the visual experience only. It's every experience has layers. So there's
Mm.
what you might see, there's what you might hear, there's what you might feel, there's how it might change you. A photograph can, in its first instance, tell you this is what I saw. A video can say this is what I saw and this is what I heard. How do you communicate the deeper layers? Well, I don't know what it is. I feel compelled to share my experience of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So when if I'm speaking to a group of people, my 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 why is to help people unlock greater understanding as to what the experience of the world can be about. That might sound very sort of generic and ethereal. And it's because the concept is probably something I can't put easy into words, other
Mm.
than to say people will know that there's things they do. I mean, we've all as photographers, I'm sure, sat at some point on a computer and sat there and been able to work into the early hours of the morning on a picture because there's something about this image that we're trying to release. There's
Mm.
something that we saw and felt, and we're trying to make sure that this image that's going to go out into the world in digital format, social media, in a book, in an album, whatever it is, but it will carry with it not just what we saw, but what we felt and what we experienced around it as well.
Mm.
And when we
Mm-hmm.
start to understand the image and it almost talks to us, and through basic techniques of editing, we start to be able to unlock the triggers that will help other people experience those things, then we get pulled into it and it almost takes us on a ride. At least that's what happens for me. So my why is to bring a greater sense of understanding and experience to the world to the people around me. And that
Mm-hmm.
extends whether it's my granddaughter, helping her understand the world around her, which is a small world at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's somebody I'm coaching in a one-on-one situation, or whether I'm on stage, whether I'm panel chairing judges, which you've seen me do,
Mm-hmm.
helping them understand and expand their universe of judging. You know, why is that important to me? I don't know. It's like, I remember talking to some mothers once. I spoke to a group called the Red Hat Society, which is entirely made up of females, and they're all over the age of 50. And they wear red and purple. They're all over the world in different chapters. And I got into a conversation about giving birth. And I said, no matter how hard a woman can try to share the experience in all its layers with me or any other male for that fact, we could never truly intrinsically understand it.
No.
No.
So,
if I'm transitioning to different things here, but here's an example of a why. A few years ago, I did a project called Girt by Sea, which was an aerial project where myself and a colleague, Dennis Glennon, flew around Australia in a 4-seater plane, a Cessna 182, over a 31-day period. We did 165 hours of flying and covered 35,000 kilometres or more, averaging 6 to 8 hours a day flying in a 4-seater plane.
Wow.
Why would you do that? It was T.S. Eliot that was quoted as saying, we shall set out on our discoveries, and in all our exploring we'll arrive back to the place we started and know the place for the first time. It's only in doing something that we can truly understand something at its deepest level. When we got back from that trip around Australia, which a million adventures, a million stories, 85,000 pictures, a book of 120 images, an exhibition of 100 images. When we got back and we were flying down the coast, because what we did is we left, I live on the west coast of Australia in Perth, which is on the coast. We flew out over the beach. We turned left and we kept Australia on the left for the next month. We left on the morning of April Fool's Day, April the 1st. Don't ask me why. And we ended up, we go all the way around and we just kept Australia on our left until we got back to where we started. And I remember the moment when we crossed the GPS coordinates of where we started that first day, and the pilot said, we've now just crossed the point, we've closed the loop. And I had this very strange feeling, realization, epiphany. It was like in my hand, I held the essence of what the words girt by sea mean in the Australian National Anthem. Because in the Australian National Anthem, it'll say, Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. That anthem was written by a Scotsman in the late 1890s. The word girt is such a strange word for the Australian language. So we grow up as in Australia wondering what does girt mean? Means surrounded by. So to understand what that means by reading a word or looking at a definition is such a shallow meaning. But by experiencing it and seeing it and feeling it, I truly got it. And in the same way, when a woman tries to explain giving birth, we can't fully comprehend it. We can't hold the whole thing. What drives me is when I experience anything, whether it's walking down a little town in Greece on an island at 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun comes up, and watching the light come up and just having the essence of a place and taking a photo, or watching a child run down a beach with pure joy. And I mean pure joy. When you look at a child's face and they're in the moment. I mean, children are in the moment so easy. Whether it's looking down from an aerial perspective, seeing something and just being mesmerized by the capacity of nature to express inherent balance and design through color, shape, texture and form in a way that you look at and go, it's perfect. And how did that happen? How do you express these things that we experience? That's why I go out there trying to achieve it. And people often say there's no such thing as perfect. And I agree with that. Nothing is perfect. But a lot of us are driven in striving to get as close as we can. How close can we get to it? Even if we acknowledge we'll never make it, how close can we get to the perfect piece of communication, the perfect image or the perfect statement, the perfect poem, the perfect piece of music that allows people to be completely lost in a feeling or an experience that you want them to have. I've kind of jumped all over the place, and it's probably giving people an insight into the chaos of my mind. But yeah.
Yeah, how do you follow that? Yeah, that's great. I think that resonates with me when you talk about when you experience something. You might sometimes when you say to someone that you're feeling the same thing that you knew already, but on a deeper level, and they kind of look at you a bit blankly. But to me, that's a bit of what you're sort of saying is that you experience something. It might be a place or whatever it is, and there are different levels, different depths to which we can experience these things. And it reminds me of when I was studying, I think it was Paul Ricoeur, and he talked about trying to recover what he called a second naivety, that in a way we come as a child initially to things, we come naively to things and just interact with it. And then we bring all our academic tools, all this, that, and the other to it, but we lose the naivety. We lose that kind of immediacy of interaction. So he was saying what we want to do is, yes, bring our knowledge in, bring our tools in, dig around, see what we can find, and then try and recover a sense of naivety afterwards. That makes all of that come together. It reminded me a bit of that.
I like that, Joe. And when you said that, it kind of echoes for me or resonates with sort of a philosophy that we originally, I often talk about being curious. People say, where do you start? Well, just start by acknowledging your own curiosity about something. And we all are curious about different things. And that's where children can be one of the greatest teachers, because children in the moment have an honest curiosity. They respond at a curious level because they don't have the intellectual understanding of a lot of things that they're experiencing. And then we overlay all of this intellect, all of this knowledge, and the mind takes over, and it overshadows and basically talks over the top of the heart. And we need to get back to then saying, okay, I've got all that knowledge. Now, okay, thank you, Mr. Mind, Mr. Brain, or Mrs. Brain. You just, thank you. I want to go back and hear the heart again, because now I want the heart to talk to me with the backing of the knowledge that you bring.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's that gives us a more complete understanding and a more complete experience. People might be listening to this thinking, well, what's this got to do with photography? How does that work? Well, if I look at my aerial abstracts, and I'll feel something, I'll sense something. I could be attracted to a shape on the ground. It could be the way the light's interacting off a film of water, or whatever it is. And I'll put a box around it, and I'll think it's this beautiful curve. There's a sensuality in the curve. There's a chaos in the rigid lines. There's drama or chaos in the texture, whatever it is. When I'm looking at the file, I think, well, okay, how do I express those elements in a more simplistic way to give people a pathway to the deeper meanings that you were just talking about? And that's where I go back and say, okay, if I want people to see the texture, then I probably need a bit more contrast and clarity. If I want people to feel the sensuality, then maybe it needs to be a bit more high key, and I need to, create a composition where those curves have the strongest voice. Maybe it's not about hard, vibrant colors. Maybe it's about more soft, subdued, ephemeral colors. How do I communicate, or how do I collate expressions that are feelings and emotions in a practical way? High contrast, drama. Low contrast, sensuality. High key, simple, gentle, calm. Low key, dark, danger, uncomfortable. Distorted compositions are going to be uncomfortable and chaotic. They're introducing chaos to the communication. So understanding that, if you are photographing a bride on her wedding day, and you look at her and you think, my God, she looks like an angel, an absolute angel. Should it be a high key, low contrast, soft ethereal image, or should it be a, pull in the blacks, pull in the whites, make sure it's got contrast? Well, no, because that works against the feeling that you want in the image. Technically, it might be that you're following the rules, give it a black point, give it a white point, give it some average contrast. But, communicating the emotion comes down to understanding the practice of photography, the craft and the editing processes that we use, and how do we use them to communicate the feeling. And that's something that when you start to play with it, bold, vibrant, rich colors communicate energy, excitement. And if you're photographing, you want to talk about, like a young child, a fairy-like feeling, then maybe the colors are more pastel pinks and light blues and soft colors. So that's where I see it can be brought back to a more practical understanding, if you like.
How about, though, I mean, there might be people who are listening and thinking, okay, Tony, okay, Joe, that's great if I've got control over what I'm doing. If I'm a fine art photographer, people are buying very much my style, my vision, and so on. But what if I'm a commissioned photographer who's brought in to do commercial projects, who's brought in to do photojournalistic or whatever it might be, where there's often not so much scope for these things? How can I bring aspects of this into my work, or am I shut out because I'm not an artist in the way that the others are? How would you respond to that kind of a question?
I don't see the difference, Joe. I know that might sound naive to some people, but it's not. If a commercial commission comes in and they say we're trying to create a set of images that communicate A, B, or C, if A is we want something with impact, we want to grab people's attention, we're trying to say this is an exciting place to go, well, then I don't want a soft, gentle image. I want something with impact that's bold, that's, so it's applying the same techniques to bring out those elements of the experience for the viewer. If they say, we'd like to communicate that we are trustworthy, that we offer a sense of calm, a sense of gentleness, then maybe high contrast, punchy images aren't the way to go. Maybe it is about a softness. So I think there's room for all of that with commercial work. At least from my perspective, there certainly is. We can, it might be then in an advertising sense, there's other things that you've got to consider. So if it's a complicated image and you're going to be advertising it on a phone, maybe having too complicated an image with lots of detail doesn't work. It needs to be a simple composition with a simple number of elements. But you either still want something that's loud and proud, or soft and ethereal, or comfortable or uncomfortable. And what I'm saying is these descriptions can be translated into techniques.
Yes.
There is a correlation. And, I've often, my background in NLP taught me that our communication, I mean, and even without the NLP, a lot of people have learnt that in communication, when we communicate with words or when we speak to somebody, only 7% of our communication is actually based in the actual word we use. And 38% of the communication is the tone of voice. And 55% of our communication is in the body language, the gesture around it. Now, the problem with communication is if someone asks you how you're doing, you say, yeah, I'm going great, and you fold your arms and you look down and you sound all down. The body language and the tone of voice are giving people 93% of the meaning. So you can say, I have never felt better in my life, I feel fantastic. And people know straight away. They don't even hear the word, right? So what I'm talking about there is congruity of message. Congruity of message. If you're sharing a picture and the picture is about happiness and energy and vibrance and things like that, well, there's a hint. Energy, brightness, contrast. Give it some punch, because that's going to be congruent.
I think what that really highlights is the importance of having a good conversation when you're being commissioned, because if you don't get enough of that information, if you just respond to, we need headshots of the board, and say, okay, I shall come and do headshots of the board, you're tying your own hands behind your back with that, because you haven't got the information about, well, what do they want to look like? What's the message? How's this being used? If you want to bring yourself to it, you need that information. You need to know a little bit more. So I think if you're in a position where you're thinking, well, all I'm doing is purely technically fulfilling a basic requirement, is perhaps you need to chat a bit more with your people who are commissioning you.
Joe, that's where, I remember when my daughters were in high school and sent messages, SMS and things, and they get upset. One week, someone would be their best friend. The next week, they'd send a text message or something, and they would be enemies. And I'd look at it and go, why? And they go, well, look what she said. And it's words on a phone. And I explained to them that you're hearing 3 words, but you don't know how the word was said. You don't know what was behind it. Could they be trying to reach out for help, but they don't know how to ask? So you come back to your example of the board. If you got an email that said, we would like to book you to do headshots of the board, and that's all you got. But then the only way you can interpret that is based on your experience of headshots of the board. Whereas if they said, if they picked up a phone and said, what we're really looking for, Joe, and this is important to us, is we're looking for shots of our people who are on the board, which are approachable, which make them look trustworthy. This gives you a whole different dynamic,
Yep.
But without that, you've got to fill in the gaps.
Exactly.
So I come back to it and say, when you're right, when you communicate or when you ask the questions and you find out as much as you can, you then take that back to your processing technique. So I'm trying to draw a link between, yes, instinct, gut, feeling, and all of that. But for some people, they go, well, that's great, but I've got this photo and I want to feel this way. Well, have a look at things like, does extra contrast move me towards that feeling, or does it take me away from that feeling? You talked earlier, you said about landscape photographers' time of day, no one shooting in the middle of the day. And there are landscape photographers who've become very successful shooting in the middle of the day by producing bold, contrasty, dramatic images, sometimes in black and white, sometimes in infrared. So it's always about context. And through our techniques in terms of lighting, editing, soft light, hard light, printing, printing on papers. When you print on papers, if you're using matte papers versus gloss papers versus satin papers versus textured papers, all of these things contribute to the experience of the viewer. Now, it's one of the beauties of paper is it adds another dimension to the experience of looking at a picture, which is why I love, obviously printing my work.
Yeah. So as well as creating your own images, you also help to mentor others. You help to coach photographers who are perhaps starting out in business or want to develop, want to move on past a point where they perhaps feel stuck. What sort of strengths do you feel you bring to that environment?
Thank you. That's actually a good question. I suppose one of the things that I, as a foundation to that, is having been a wedding photographer and photographed 991 weddings, but who counts? I would have shot at least 5,000 portraits, family portraits. I've, babies right through to elderly people, having done commercial work for many years, shot landscapes for 25 years, travel photography over the last 10, and been a fine art, represented by a gallery for the last 13 years and exhibiting, every 18 months or so. So I've got multiple, 25 solo exhibitions or something and a heap more of collaborative and things. So there's a background there. On top of that, I've entered competitions over the years to push myself to, in the early days to get marketing material and to sort of say, this is, look, my peers think I'm good, so they got me work. These days it's for different reasons. So having done well in competitions locally and nationally and internationally, having been a judge, having been a chair of competitions and panel chairs, having run competitions, what I'm saying is there's a background there where pretty much most of the areas that people might want to move into, I got some experience. So I can kind of relate to when people say, well, I want to move into this area or I'm stuck in this area. Technically, I think I'm a good photographer technically. Am I the absolute best? No, I think there's quite a few photographers that technically would be stronger in certain areas. But I think my main strength is the ability to understand what people are trying to move towards, or at least help them understand where they want to go, and help them carve out a path or shine a path in front of them so that they know what direction to take, and then facilitating either through direct training. So yes, it could be Photoshop or Capture One. It could be sitting there working on images. It could be assisting. I've got a few people at the moment. I'm assisting with curation of exhibitions. Sometimes it's about a mixture of confidence and motivation that I'm trying to handle, plus give them certain basic skills. And sometimes it's areas that they have an interest in that I may not be the best person, but I have a lot of connections. I've got a big, I've been very blessed, Joe, and I'm privileged to have friends all over the world these days, and people who are at the top of their game in lots of different areas. And sometimes I'll say, look, this is the person you need to speak to. So whether it's the coaching one-on-one where I work with an individual on their particular journey, or whether it's in a mastermind situation, for instance, where I'll facilitate a group for a year where everybody's on their own journey, but we're working within a brains trust where everybody supports everybody else. I mean, we all know if we go on social media, we'll get generally mostly likes from our friends. We show our family and our closest friends, and we're a legend, and we should be exhibited all over the world. And that's fantastic and it's powerful, but it doesn't always give us the constructive feedback that's going to help us grow faster. So Mastermind is about helping people come into a group where they are accountable to the group. They work on their own projects at their own pace, but they report back and they lean on each other and support each other at the same time, and it culminates in a retreat. So there's lots of different ways I work with people, and they're the sort of things I sort of offer is tap into what I've got a background in, whatever that is, and I'll look to help you grow creatively in the direction you want to go.
So what aspects of that would you say people most commonly need help with? And that's whether they recognize it or don't. So, someone coming to you and through your process of getting to know them, you realize where they really need help. What would you say that is is there one?
So again, that's a great question, Joe. And the thing that I probably see the most is we live in a world where we're bombarded, increasingly so, with information that tells us we don't know enough. We need this and we need that. We need a better lens. We need a new camera. We need new software. We need to upgrade. We need this plug-in. We need this app. We need to learn this technique. And the reality is, I use 95% of my work is produced using things I've known for 15 years. And it's not about getting new techniques. It's about learning which ones to use and when. And helping people understand that you don't need to learn everything. Because if we all went about our lives trying to learn everything we could, no one's going to do anything except just feel like they're dumb, that they don't know anything. Was it Einstein that said if a fish judged its intelligence by its ability to climb a tree, it would think it was perennially stupid? So I find that most people just need to be guided in the understanding that, first of all, what do you want to do? Then figure out what do I need to know to do it? And then go out and learn how to do that. We only need to know how to do what it is we need to know how to do what we want to do. And a bit of a tongue twister, but
people might have to replay that one a couple of times. And
you need to learn to do what it is you need to know how to do so you can do what you want to do.
There we go. Yeah, good.
If there's a technique or something that comes along and somebody says, this is a new technique you need to learn, and you go, well, what does it do? And they tell you, and you go, well, it doesn't actually apply to anything I want to produce, so I don't really need to learn how to do it. And the kicker is, if down the track I find I was wrong, then I'll just go and learn it. The second thing I find is that people get hung up on, someone told me I've got to do it this way. And I sort of point, I've been on stage, and I'm sure, Joe, you've done a bit of teaching, and you'll show someone, here's how you would do this, or here's how I would do this. And then three people say, oh, there's a better way. There's a quicker way. There's a new way. There's another way. And my point is, there might be. But you know what? If you like this picture that I'm showing you, then this is how I do it. And have a look at it. If this process works for you, try it. And if it doesn't, and you can find another way that's better for you, try that. So I think simplification, Joe, I think people get confused or they get worried that they don't know enough or they're not doing it the right way. To me, if you're producing a piece of work that is saying exactly what you want it to say and expressing how you want it to express, then whatever you're doing to get there is fine. If it's not, figure out the parts that you've got gaps and go and learn what you need to fill those gaps. And that's kind of sums up what I try to teach, really, is what do you want to produce? And if you don't know, let's see if we can figure that out together. And when you've done that, and part of that is tapping into the why. So we do explore that. And passion is a good source of why. And then it's like, well, okay, you know how to do this, but you don't know how to do that. So let's just learn that bit. And don't worry about the other 400 things that you can learn. Let's worry about that. Now you can do what you need to do to produce what you want to. And then when you go, you know what, I'd like to do it a bit different. Let's go and figure out what you need to learn to do that. Keeps it fun.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. I think passion is so important for, especially if you want to be a professional, for longevity. If you start in a genre just because you think you can make better money out of it, that can be a mistake. I think you have to have enough of a passion that it sustains you throughout, that you want to keep going back, that it's something that when you do doesn't just exhaust you, but that somehow feeds you. Do you know what I mean?
100%. And one thing I've learned is we are the sum total of all the experiences we've had in our life, all of them, everything, good or bad. And that's what makes it hard to say, this is my why. Even though I always recommend we try our best to define it because there are things we just have to do. That's kind of tied in with our passion. I every now and then I can hear myself when I'm doing a podcast or talking, and you can probably sense it now. I have so much I want to share. And my voice is, I'm not tired. I could talk like this for hours, and don't worry, we won't. But why? What drives that? It's because I'm just I'm so passionate is the only word. I'm just passionate about sharing what I've discovered about the life experience. And I like to do it through image making. And I like to help others do it through their image making. And when you can acknowledge that, it becomes a lot simpler. And you know what, Joe, it makes it fun. I mean, you do a podcast. I would hazard that you don't do this. You wouldn't do this if there wasn't an element of satisfaction and fun in it.
Well, it's done because I enjoy working with people, but I also get talking to people that I might not otherwise get much time with. But it's also, it's knowing that you're contributing to the industry and helping other people to see different perspectives. Yeah, I mean, I don't earn anything from the podcast, so people might think, why on earth are you spending your time doing it? And you think, well, there is a joy in sharing passion. There's a joy in teaching, offering people different perspectives and say, find the one that suits you. Yeah.
And, that brings me to one of my other absolute favorite topics is the topic of connection. I like to do these sort of things. I like to coach. I like to speak. I like to present. I like to assist judges because they're all mechanisms and avenues through ways that we can connect with people. And life, for me, life is about connecting. And and I feel that we get the most satisfaction and joy out of connecting through our strengths. And one of my strengths is I feel is empathy and a compassion for people that I can use that conduit, if you like, to assist them in coming up the ladder, in finding a greater purpose, in finding more value in themselves, feeling better about themselves. And by doing that, I'm contributing to them doing the same for others. And it's not meant to sound altruistic or anything like that. And as you say, you don't become monetarily rich doing things like that necessarily, but you do become rich in life. And wow, I'm old, but I'm young. There's so much I like to share, and there's so much I enjoy about whether it's sitting down with somebody at the back of a conference who's had a difficult time because they got a bad score in an awards, or whether it's standing in front of an audience of 500 people, or helping a panel of judges assist an entrant with a constructive feedback, it's not just about awarding them high scores and patting them on the back, but assisting them to share some information with the entrant so that entrant is enthused, motivated, and inspired to grow creatively, to keep going, and to get better at communicating the things they want to share, you know? And as you say, contribution and connection, that's probably at the core of the why.
Ah, well, there you go. You've rediscovered your why. I mean, for me, one of my strengths is, it's called judgment within one of the strengths profiling systems, and that doesn't mean I'm a judgmental so-and-so. Well, maybe sometimes when I'm judging images, but what that is about is one of my strengths is kind of stepping back and looking at things and listening to different voices, listening to different opinions, and weighing things up. And I think one thing that can be limiting for all of us, not just for photographers, is getting too stuck in a rut, listening to the same voices all the time. Just having our own preconceived ideas reconfirmed to make us feel better. Yeah, sometimes we need a little bit of a comfort, but I would say listening to different people from different parts of the world, from different backgrounds, from different genres to yourself, it all just helps enrich you. You don't have to do exactly what any of them do.
No.
You can learn from that interaction.
Yeah. I think, we live in a privileged, I think we work in a privileged area in terms of photography and image making. We really do. And I feel doubly blessed because I get the opportunity to make pictures, to share pictures with people, whether it's my art or a little bit of portrait work or stuff, but I also have the other opportunity to help others. And, whether it's challenging, encouraging, connecting, providing compassion, if we, people, what is it? Someone said once, you don't stop playing because you get old because you stop playing. If we keep doing things and we keep staying involved and we keep trying to become better people and we help others to do that, then I think I certainly find that I get younger every day. And, it comes out in your photography because I keep finding new ways to express how I feel and what I experience through my photography. And I always get excited when I find something new in my work that I think, I'm going to go down that path a little bit. And I try to encourage that in others as well, because I think, as you mentioned the why again, understanding why you do it, or at least acknowledging that there's some things you're passionate about and just following that as a bit of a guide. That's what drags us forward. That's what gives us purpose and brings satisfaction for me anyway.
What would you say you continue to learn from your interactions as a tutor? Because some people just see it as a one-way thing. Well, it's guru versus disciple kind of thing, and you're imparting your wisdom, telling them everything. But from my experience, the more you teach, the more you keep learning, the more you realise you don't know. So I wonder, what sort of things do you feel you get from your experience of teaching?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot of things, and one of them you've just mentioned, that you learn to see the world through someone else's eyes. And, when we look at the world and we think it's it's not two-dimensional, it's multifaceted. And if you can shift perspective, and a lot of my exhibitions have centered around, and my bodies of work have been around the idea of shifting perspective. And, and literally speaking, from in the air, you're shifting perspective to look at the same things that people see from the ground. So, when I work with people, sometimes I sort of, in the first instance, can look at it and go, okay, after having a conversation or being with them, I go, I kind of feel I know where they're at and where they're going and how I can help. And other times might be a bit surprised. I think, wow, and I never kind of figured that or saw that in them or never expected that. And that opens my eyes even further and broadens my understanding of the world. And I think when our horizons are broadened, whether you're a teacher or a student, you challenge yourself to become better, So I'd like to think that what I'm learning through teaching is where my flaws are, the areas that I can't help, or that, I thought I could help doing this. Now I've got to become stronger at that. I find I'm learning that I always it allows me the opportunity to be refreshed in thinking, keep it simple, because I go down this road of exploring new avenues and then I come back to teach someone, and it brings me back to basics sometimes, or basics not necessarily in technique, but in basic thinking, simple philosophies and simple principles, and reminds me of just how powerful simple principles are and simple philosophies are. And it also allows or keeps, I'd like to think it keeps me grounded, because it's when you're working with somebody else, and if they continue to work with you, and I'm very lucky, I get a lot of repeat business, it's kind of reinforcing that it's not what you do on your own that counts. It's what you do in community, as you mentioned earlier, contributing, whether it's in a coaching situation or just, chairing judging or something where you're giving back. You learn the value of contribution, and often that's where you get the most satisfaction. So I learn a bit about. I always learn about myself, and I learn about what I don't know. And I mean, there's some simple practical things. Sometimes I'm asked questions that I think, well, that's something that's coming in that I don't know as much about. I've got to go away and research it. If I'm going to be asked questions about it, I better learn it. And it forces me to continue to grow. And I've got one person that I've been working with for quite a long time, and I asked them, why do they continue to work with me? I don't feel guilty. I just, are you sure I just, as long as I'm contributing and you're getting value? And their answer was really interesting. They said, you're out there, you're constantly pushing boundaries, and you're at the, you're involved in what's going on, and that connects me to what's going on. And that sort of taught me something as well, that by being a teacher, by being a mentor, it's incumbent on me. There's a level of responsibility to stay informed. So it's driving me as well. It's driving me as well.
Yeah, it's good. So if you were to encounter somebody who is on the verge thinking of becoming a professional photographer but hasn't yet sort of made the leap, what 3 things would you say to that person?
I think you touched on it earlier. If you're serious about trying to become a professional in an area in photography, stick to the areas you have a genuine appreciation for. If you don't like the idea of true love and romance, don't become a wedding photographer. If you can't stand kids, and I don't mean you've chosen not to have children, that's not what I mean, but if kids grate on you, and if you can't sit somewhere, and if you're on a plane and there's kids in the next seat and you get upset and angry and cranky, don't become a child photographer.
No.
If you don't like rules and regulations and things like that, and you don't like being told how to photograph things and told to do what the client wants, possibly commercial work's going to be difficult. So stick to the things you love. If you have a genuine appreciation for symmetry and design, then maybe architecture and commercial is for you. If you can't help but smile at the innocence and the wonderment of a child, maybe children photography is for you. If you get a tear in your eye when you watch a romantic movie, or love reading, love the idea of romance and watching people who you think, those two are going to make it, maybe wedding photography is for you. If you have a genuine appreciation for nature and, a love for conservation and wildlife and the beauty that's inherent in Mother Nature and in beauty that's inherent in the world, in planet Earth, then maybe that's the area you go into. So certainly listen to yourself. Be aware of the current market and be aware of where photography is. It's not the days of wedding photographers selling family photos and guest photos and making half their income from selling guest photos. That's just, it's common sense. It doesn't work. So those sort of principles, be aware of what has changed in the market that you might be looking to go into, and what people are genuinely looking for. And if you're only coming into it now, you almost really want to be looking at to what's probably going to come next. Where do we go next? And I think be aware that it's not a 9-to-5 job. I learned, years ago, that for me, I smile when I see people who feel like they can turn off their brand. And what I mean by that is, I don't get paid if I don't work. I work for myself. And if people meet me in the street, down the beach, when I'm down the shopping centre buying dinner, or if they meet me at a conference or in another country, or they come to a job that I'm shooting, or I photograph their family, or they come to an exhibition, I would like to think they meet the same Tony Hewitt. And
Mm.
I have come across people in the industry that, and this isn't meant to sound judgmental. It may be considered that. You meet them somewhere and you look at the person, the way they dress or the way they act, and they've got no time for people. And then when they are on the job or on the clock, they want to be
Mhm.
friendly and that, and it's incongruent. And
Mm.
that's why if you can't
Mm.
live like that, if you can't be the brand, then I
Mm.
think it's going to be harder. I really do. Most of my
Definitely, yeah.
friends most of the friends that I have and people I've known in photography who have been successful over a long period of time, they are their brand.
Yeah.
Whether you meet
Yeah.
them in front of a camera, behind a camera, off duty, it's genuinely the same person. I'm not saying we don't have secrets and we don't have our
Mm.
private time. That's not what I mean. But it's not a clock on, clock off thing,
Mm.
And I like to think that whenever I'm out and about, I am my brand, and I'm constantly not advertising, but what people see is an example of what they can expect if they employ me to do something or they buy one of my pictures. If I'm gonna, I like to think I'm a generous person with my time and my experience and my knowledge, and I like to
Mhm.
think I have empathy and compassion, and I like to think people know that I'll spend time with them if they look like they could use a friend,
Mhm.
and that isn't just when I'm in a situation where it might benefit me. It can be, where it's not. And one
Mm.
of my greatest inspirations in life was, has been, is, and unfortunately who is gone now, is Robin Williams. And I remember the
Ah.
stories that
Mhm.
people tell that for a lot of his life, he would pop up unannounced in hospitals.
Mhm.
And this is well documented. And he would spend hours and hours with the kids who were very sick, terminal.
Mhm. Mhm.
He would sit on the floor and play with them. He would sometimes show up in disguise as just as Mrs. Doubtfire. And he contributed
Mm.
to their enjoyment in the moment. And he never advertised it. He never posted it anywhere. He never told anyone he was coming. Nurses would tell stories that they just hear the kids laughing in the nursery and they'd go in and the Robin Williams would be sitting in there with a red nose on and doing crazy things. And I like to think that with someone like him, he's a role model for me because my understanding is although there were obviously personal difficulties and things in his life,
Mm.
whether he was on a comedy show, whether he was on stage, and whether he was walking into a hospital unannounced, he was Robin Williams. And
Mm.
when people come to me for coaching, or they come on a photo tour, or workshop, and I get to go to all sorts of wonderful places and take small groups to those places, they're going to get the same Tony Hewitt. The
Mm.
one that you're talking to now, I'd like to think is the one that people find whether they find me off guard or they see me in the street. That's the same Tony Hewitt.
Mm.
That's what I aspire to be.
I think that that's really important from several angles. From the business perspective of brand consistency, if a high end brand started posting garbage on their social media and website and sort of thing, you'd be thinking, "What on earth's going on here?" It undermines the business. It undermines your relationship with people. If you are putting on a face in order to run your business, you have to ask, well, is that really the right situation for you if you have to be fake? But it's also your own personal health, your own personal well-being. If you're not congruent, if you're not the same person wherever you go, you're much more likely to suffer from stress. You're much more likely to have other mental health problems, potentially going that kind of a route. It is really beneficial. This is something that comes through in positive psychology, the idea of authenticity. And that to me is so important. I would say that's my core value, authenticity, and helping others to be that way too. So it's something that benefits the business. It's something that benefits the people around you. It's something that benefits you to be consistently yourself and true to that.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better, Joe. You're right. Integrity is in partnership with congruency and authenticity. And
Mm.
coming back to your question, and I didn't mean to go off message, but the message was there that if someone's thinking of becoming a professional photographer, photography, maybe not all categories, although there's an element of it, but most categories, it involves connection. And if photography is a form of communication, and if you're going to communicate to other people, you need to be in tune with what that communication is about and what it's for. And if you're not acting in a congruent way, if people are finding different aspects of you, that's going to be more difficult. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm sure there's people have different reasons for hiding things, and I'm not saying we don't have secrets, as I said, and we need our personal time and all of that. But in general, when they come across you, can you be yourself? And if you want to be successful in business, let alone in photographic business, don't try and be like someone else. I mean, it's starting out and emulating others, whether it's their style of work or the model of business is fine. But at some point, make it yours. Evolve it into an expression of who you are, because that's the easiest thing to keep going. If it's you and it's you naturally, that's easy. If it's something else, you got to keep working at it.
You haven't got to remember the lie that you've been telling, have you? Sort of like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm supposed to be like this in this context,
Yeah. And, I remember I get asked on occasion, how long do you think before you'll retire? And it's like, well, why will I retire? Like, if I set out in this industry and someone said, well, what do you want to do at the end? I'd say, well, I'd like to get to a point when I retire where I can go traveling, I can contribute to people and feel important. And when I say feel important, I mean be of value to people. And do some traveling and explore and express my art. Well, that's what I'm doing. So I won't retire. It doesn't mean everything I do is professional or paid for. A lot of what I do is not, camera club talks, lots of different things I do at schools and stuff like that. But because what I do is just it's an extension of me anyway, it's easy. It's easy to keep going after 35 years or whatever. I'm super excited about what's coming up in the next 3 or 4 years, and I can't go beyond that because I haven't had time to think about that yet. But I've got a lot more coming up and a lot of things I want to do and projects that are on the go. And being a professional photographer, I think, is about figuring out what your lane is, bring your strengths. Who are you without photography? What are you naturally good at? And how does that translate into the photography world, and build a business around it? Strongest foundation you can have.
Well, we're very glad that you're not going to retire from being Tony, or retire from your work as a whole. There, I mean, it's been a really fascinating sort of conversation. Touched on quite a few elements here. Now, if people would like to find out a little bit more, perhaps to connect with you online, see some of your work, what are the best places for them to go?
Well, probably the easiest one is the website, tonyhewitt.com. It's pretty simple. So TonyHewitt.com. And if you go there, you'll find access to a lot of things, projects that I've done, images that people buy, workshops, photo tours, all of that's there. Some information. If you just like following socials, then, Instagram, Tony.Hewitt is probably a good starting point. Or at Tony Hewitt is Facebook. I don't spread myself across socials much more than that these days. I did explore that, but I found that keeping up with it felt like work. It felt too hard, and it actually, as you alluded to earlier, it started putting stress. Like you start to worry that you're not promoting yourself enough. And I think, you know what? If I treat people the right way, and when I'm working with people, I genuinely try my best to help them, then they're going to tell other people if I'm worth something. If they think I've contributed to their growth, contributed to their enjoyment of what they do, then they'll tell people. And me doing more, and I do a fair bit anyway, it's more about if I'm worth something, if there's something for people to really want to learn from me, they'll hear about it. If they haven't, they can go and have a look for themselves and start from there. Send me a message. I'm happy to respond. I usually do within a few days, unless I'm traveling, which can be a bit more difficult. If you see me at a conference or something, I was at Societies this year, as you said, and fingers crossed I get the opportunity to come again in the future, maybe 2026 coming up. Come and say hello. I don't bite. And as I said earlier, I'd like to think that the person you're listening to now is the person that you'll meet if you come and say hello on the conference floor.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Tony. Thank you very much for agreeing to come onto the podcast.
It's been a pleasure, and honestly, it's an honour. I've felt, no matter how many times, it's always a pleasure, and it's always an honour to be asked to share and contribute. I wish, hope everybody who's listening got some things out of this that will assist them in their creative journey going forward. I want to thank you, Joe, for what you do. I think it's a wonderful gift to the industry that you put yourself out, you connect, you network, you bring these people in that you then share and contribute and distribute to others that may need it. And I think you need to be applauded. And maybe you get that, maybe you don't, I don't know, but I certainly would like you to know that. So thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. This is the Focused Professional Podcast.